to be acquired like a subject of study, mathematics or English or literature or science and so on. And why yoga becomes a necessity for the modern world. That is one idea which I wanted to bring out that day, but we had no time. Now that brings in the more important question of human culture to the fore. That is to say, what is the aim of a culture? What does a culture ultimately meant to lead to? And what is the nature of present culture which is now dominating the whole of the world? It is Western culture in the sense of a culture in which practical reason dominates with its ally called science. Practical reason which is applied to material energy, and it has invented science. Science has invented again uses of material energy, and this energy is applied to life. With the result that life is more comfortable, life is now more easily satisfied with its needs and impulses of man and all the ideas man can very easily satisfy now. So the nature of modern culture or the present culture is domination of practical reason with science as its ally, and all the time the attempt of the whole collective consciousness is to put man in the center, his desire and his needs as the things to be satisfied, and culture is putting man as its goal, so to say, and trying to see whether man's desire soul or man's ambitious soul or man's life could become more comfortable. This is the one idea of looking at a culture. The other difficulty with this culture this outlook created is that it has created an economic centric outlook or economy centric outlook of life. That is to say, the whole culture not only centers around man, but around utilization of material energy. And material energy tends to create economy-centric outlook of life. So, the cultural values today dominating not only Europe, but the whole of the world practically, not only excluding India. Everywhere, the steamroller of this economy-centric outlook is dominating collective life. That is to say, what is the aim of human existence? Not merely practical reason and science and application to life, but also putting economy in the highest value of collective life. There was a time, for instance, let us go back to 2500 years, Greek culture. Now, in the time of the Greek culture, there was intellect. Reason was not lacking, but it was idealistic reason, not practical reason of today. It was a mind that was curious, not utilitarian. You see, a mind was curious to know nature, things, ideas, and find out. It was idealistic intellect. It was mind with a curiosity to know things, but not turn to utility particularly. That was one. Second character of Greek mind was that it was political minded. It was aesthetic. It had an idea of beauty, which I think modern culture still lacks very fundamentally. And it had also an idea of perfection of man as a developed intellect with an idealistic touch, philosophic mind, political life, sense of beauty, and a perfection of body. A strong body also, and a beautiful body. Well, that was a Greek idea. In that, though intellectuality is a common element, you find that modern culture has gone a different way, not the same line. It is practical reason applied to life, utilitarian, and it looks upon man as an economic animal. Put it very strongly if you want to put it trenchantly. Man is an economic animal, and the whole function of the collective life of man must be to organize the economic life and make him an efficient economic animal or efficient economic group. A nation or a collective life, if you take, then it will say that we want to create an efficient economic group. Yes, this is one way of looking at it. And that has been now, if you go back to past India or Greek or any Greece or any other country, you find what was the highest man or the best man? Then in India they will say Rishi, a seer, Yagnavalkya, or any great spiritual figure. That is at once it will come to their mind. But the greatest man, the highest type, the perfect type of human being, Gautam Buddha, or you will say Krishna, or somebody who is spiritually high. If you go to Greece, they will say Socrates, Plato. Yes, suddenly the time come to anybody's mind at once. Today, if you say, oh yes, Ford, Rockefeller, immediately you see the difference immediately. Yes. That shows that the values of culture have been changed, and this economy-centric collective value of life is something that is undermining the very fundamental essential spirit of man. We must now, therefore, if we want to create an integrated culture, a perfect culture that is worthy the name of man or the human dignity, then we must restore in collective life the higher values. Ethics, idealism, you see, religious life, spirituality, it is that which must be the highest goal. Yes, economic life is necessary. Organization even is necessary. Science is necessary. Whatever conquest this human spirit attain in any field of life is the gain for the whole of humanity. We must have science, we must have progress, we must have organization. But economy is not the central pivot of man's existence. It is an important item of individual and collective life. Man is a productive animal, and therefore, his economic life must be organized as an individual and collective. And by doing so, man will be saving some energies, utilizing the resources of nature to the best, so that he may develop into something, not that he may go on accumulating, which is stupid. It means, if you look at it absolutely detached, from a detached point of view, it will look as if man is confronted with an infinite treasure of nature, say a mountain of gold. And the attitude which modern man seems to have, though if you tell him, he will say, no, no, that is not my attitude. But that it will boil down to, if you analyze the motive forces which is moving the whole cultural life of man today, that he is in face of a golden treasure or a golden mountain. And he thinks 70 or 80 years are given to me. So like a robber, let me rob as much of it as possible. This is all that it comes to ultimately. You see, you are in face of an infinite treasure given to you without your asking. You don't know how and when and how it happened. It is there. The way to look at it would be, or should be, that yes, how to now be thankful for what is given first, and then to see that the motive forces of the human consciousness, is it all this instinct of acquisition and possession, which if alone is given a chance, it would be robbing. It is all the time as it were a treasure is to be robbed. Well, you are in face of it has been there since eternity. No worry about it. There is fear. They always are afraid this will be exhausted and that will be exhausted. And people always say sun will become cold like ice one day and everything will go to as if it was in their power to do all these things. It's all right to have your hypotheses and ideas about these things. These are not in human hands. But that's another matter. We are only talking of the attitude of modern culture to man's highest fulfillment. Wherein lies man's fulfillment? Restoration of higher values of life, ethics, morality, religious life, idealism, sacrifice, some sort of rising to a plane which is higher than economics. Well, that makes the fundamental character of modern culture. And because the highest spirit of man is in danger of permanently being overpowered by this economy centric outlook, that a spiritual attitude towards life becomes necessary. One. Second point is that if you look at it from the point of view of philosophy, the idea is that there is an opposition between matter and spirit. See, in the world of spirit and in the world of religious life or spiritual life or philosophy, there has always been an opposition between matter and spirit. And there have been outlook in which matter has been affirmed and spirit is denied. There are philosophies and religions that always say that matter is, something to be rejected, to be denied, to be thrown away, and spirit is all and everything. There are outlooks which say, no, spirit is everything and matter is nonsensical, idiotic, because matter creates all the difficulty for the human spirit. This opposition between matter and spirit has been at work, and it is now at a kind of a crossroad in the human culture. That is to say, now Man has come to such a mastery over matter that he may as well say that, well, this is enough if he is an animal. He may say, well, I have got now infinite mastery over matter, and what does it matter whether a spirit exists or not? With the mind only, without going into deeper realities of the spirit, I have got a mastery over matter. So what is you bothering about a spirit which I don't immediately feel? This opposition really is not true and real. This opposition is apparent. The One of the followers of Mahatma Gandhi, Vinoba Bhave, who is walking all over India on foot, he is performing the pilgrimage on foot. I practically covered the whole of India on foot for the last 5 or 6 years. Well, his one assertion has struck me as very characteristic, which agrees so fundamentally with Sri Aurobindo's outlook, that two realities alone now will be able to be felt as real by mankind. One, the science, means mastery of man over matter, and another spirituality. These are the only two things that will now govern the individual and collective life of man. More and more, the tendency will be to emphasize science because that is the practical hold over the energies of matter and its utilization of man's life, and spirituality, which will give him his true self realization, so to say, make him experience his true self, which will be able to govern his mastery over the energy of matter or forces of matter. Well, this, I think there is a great truth in this feeling, because Sri Aurobindo always said in his Life Divine, in the very second or third chapter, he deals with the subject of this opposition between matter and spirit. And he says that matter is the mold for the expression of the spirit. They are the ends of one reality which is indivisible. At one end, when one human mind sees, it sees matter. At the other end, when it wants to feel, it feels the spirit. But they are the end, two extremities of one indivisible reality. It is not as if where matter was in opposition to spirit, or that spirit was something which negated matter. In fact, matter is the mold, a field for the expression, or you can say mask of the spirit, so that it is not immediately seen by the human sense and mind as a spirit, but behind it there is always the presence of the spirit which animates all material objects. There is no material object in the strict sense inert, unconscious, or dead. Matter appears as if it is dead, but it is not inert and dead. It is an apparent inconscience of matter, which is man's difficulty to accept whether there is any consciousness behind it or not. But these two ends have to be reconciled, have to be brought into harmony in his cultural life. And I think that that is where the question of spirituality as a dynamic element in man's growth becomes a pressing necessity today. There are people who might say that we might revive our religious life. But religious life has now, the forms of religious life have outlived their utility more or less everywhere. And this bringing together of all the dynamic elements of life today by scientific progress and the means of transportation and communication has made unity of mankind almost a pressing necessity. You cannot get out of it. World is one, as Mother said, and it is not to be created. Unity of the world is there already. It's now for man only to realize it. And it is very near realization if man would know that this coming together of individuals and nations on every day by hundreds of ways in which not merely commerce, but I mean thought being exchanged on planes of life and so on. And there's some pressing inner necessity which makes them feel that now the world has become too short and small, and therefore the unity becomes more or less such a necessity that man cannot avoid it today. That makes the restoration of all forms of religion rather difficult, because religions, I pointed out last time that it is two parts. You see, an inner core of experience and an outer organization for life, a social organization of religion, or you might call it an outer, ceremonials and rituals, and a social aspect of it which has done some good, now has ceased to be a living inspiration to people to realize the truth of religious life. Can it lead man to his self development? Would it tend to lead his soul to the experience of the higher reality if it is restored? Is it possible even to restore? It is doubtful, very doubtful. No religious form, I think, anywhere in the world would have any chance of being restored and promise man the fulfillment of his religious seeking. I don't think that it is easily possible. The forms have done their work. You can only take this one small instance that in the last war, every nation prayed in her temples or churches for their victory. Now that shows where the outer form of religion can lead. I mean, it is puerile to think that one God to whom the whole universe belongs would want one part to conquer and the other part not to conquer. It is ridiculous. I mean, it shows how religious form cannot lead to any real, understanding of, even understanding apart from experience. So it is the spiritual attempt that is now the need. What is spirituality? It is organization of experience of inner life for is experience of the ultimate reality which man is and with the universe is. It's a kind of science of self-culture. Really, it's a science of self-culture in which one develops himself and by self-development ultimately ends by exceeding his present formula of self. You see, it's a process of development and self-exceeding. Just as in science, you see, there are two ways of acquiring knowledge. One is the scientific way in which you use your sense and mind and take hold of some instruments also and take the aid of instrument to increase the range of sense and therefore come to correct conclusion by mind. Well, just as you take a telescope or a microscope and then you say this, the enlarging capacity of the microscope, no, 1 million times. Then you say, no, that is not 10 million times. And you go on never stopping the increasing the possibility and capacity of your instrument. In the same way, the psychology of man also is an instrument which is capable of development. You see, just as in the increasing the range of sense and the possibility of mind acquiring the knowledge of matter, one does not admit any limitation. In the same way, in the seeking for life, seeking for the truth of mind, or seeking for the truth of the spirit, there is no limit. If we had limited the potentiality of matter, we would not have come to handle the vast reservoir of material energy. If some scientist said, oh, we cannot do this work in science, this is not possible, then you would never seek, never search, never experiment. In the same way, if we categorically simply say, oh, such a thing cannot happen, then naturally it cannot happen because you will never try. So that there is no point in limiting the potentiality of life, in potentiality of mind, and potentiality of the human spirit. Spirituality is the organization of experiment or experience in the development of the inner capacity so that just as the instrument, the microscope and the telescope increase in range, in the same way the vital capacity, the mental capacity, the psychic capacity of man is increased. The very instrument by which man is acquiring knowledge is made subtle, and the very development of subtlety makes it stronger, so that you increase the range, the subtlety and the power of psychological instrument by what is called spirituality. Spirituality is not magic. It's not extraordinary or abnormal. What is normal? Even normal life of man is abnormal. You say normal means many people seem to live in a certain way, but that way itself is abnormal. It is not normal from the point of view. And the fact that man is not able to be satisfied with his present constitution, like the plant or the animal. The plant and animal are quite happy. There is nothing, no disturbance in their inner constitution because, well, they are subjected to a process by universal nature. And universal nature does everything for them. Man is a dissatisfied animal because in him is planted by nature herself this seed of self-development and self-exceeding. He is not meant to remain confined to his present formula. And therefore to say that to try for something more, well, is to become abnormal is wrong. Is wrong. Where will you stop normality? It was abnormal to reach the moon. Now it is normal. Is it not? It was terrible to think that one could reach the poets only wrote poetry about the moon. Never thought that one could reach the moon. But now one thinks it can be done. Well, even the same way, the possibilities and potentiality of the spirit have to be granted and attempted, because there is no limit to the potentiality of the human spirit. even human life. So, just as in science we don't limit the potentiality but increase constantly the instrumentation, subtlety, and range and power, in the same way the psychology of man is quite capable of development. And this development is called spirituality, or you call it yoga if you like. Yoga is therefore a process by which one undergoes self culture or inner culture with a view to realize the ultimate reality of his own existence, the ultimate reality at work in the cosmos, because they are one. There is one truth at work. Well, this brings us to the problem of what is yoga. I referred in the beginning of talk to this economy-centric outlook which is now undermining ethical, idealistic, religious and spiritual values of man's consciousness. And Sri Aurobindo's yoga is the first attempt in the realm of yogic life where one is made to answer this question: is it possible to organize individual or collective life on the spiritual seeking of man? Could we live life and use life as a means for this establishing the inner value of life as the highest value of existence? Could we use life and base life on the spirit, on man seeking for the spiritual reality? Till now, many yogis and many schools of yoga said that that was not possible, except one or two systems which made an attempt and did not fully succeed. But even the systems of traditional systems of yoga always said that is not possible. Sri Aurobindo's is the first vision of life in which he says it is quite possible. It is quite possible for man to base his life on his seeking for the spirit, individual and collective life. Now, this is something that is very important for modern man, because if he has the seeking, even 1% of people, because all people do not go for the same thing. If 1% has that seeking, well, then it gives a chance of trying to organize life in such a way as to make it dynamic in life. And to make this, after all, when you say man or mind, what is man or what is mind? Is a product of cosmic evolution, universal evolution. Some universe and energy began to work somewhere in the most unimaginable past, you see, far, far perhaps in eternity. And a slow process of gradual evolution seems to be at work. And as a result of this slow process of evolution, you see, we have got matter, we have got life, we have got mind. And this mind and human being or humanity is the product of that process. It's not merely something otiose thrown from outside, as it were, something on the top, nothing to do with the basis. Man is so much common, has so much in common with animals, for instance. He has so much in common with the plant life on which he lives, isn't it? He has so much in common with matter. After all, he is a piece of matter from one point of view. So that man is matter, man is life, which is there all around him. So that man is connected with the cosmos. And this mind is, really speaking, effort of the universal energy to shorten her own labor. She brought mind into existence so that she may realize in a short span the reality at work behind her mask, behind the outer appearance. Man is a product of nature. And when man seeks reality, it's nature in man that is seeking reality. It's the universal nature that is really working in man. Man is wrong in thinking he is something exceptional and special and particular. There's nothing. He is a product of the cosmic process, the universal process. And he is seeking for a reality. The universal nature is seeking in him for a reality. That is why Sri Aurobindo, in the beginning of his book, the famous book Synthesis of Yoga, said, all life is yoga. That is how yoga is connected with the whole universal process of evolution. Only all life is yoga of nature. All life is not conscious yoga. All life is yoga of nature. And nature works with, slow process. Nature is slow. And nature is wasteful. She can afford to be waste. She doesn't mind. If the design of a flower is to be changed, it is not done by the flower or the plant. It is done by nature. And she will take 200 or 300 years to bring about a change in the design of a flower. See, she doesn't mind. So, yoga of nature, the whole movement of universal expression that we see in ourselves and around is moving towards the reality. And in man, it tends to become a self-conscious and a quicker process. It is supposing you have a flow of ocean and you throw a piece of wood into it. Well, there is tide, it is going to one direction. There is ebb, it goes into another direction. Then after 24 hours, if you see, it has moved from the original position, some here, some there, like that. It has moved somewhere, not exactly where you threw it. Yes, that is ordinary process of nature. You see, this is nature's life, yoga. If you take life, life itself is also moving towards the divine, but it is moving so slowly that it will take millenniums if man is left like that. You take a man of 20 or 15 and try to study him. Go to his life at 50 or 55, and you will see he has made some progress. In the young age, he was full of, stupidity, ignorance, and self-consciousness, egoism, and selfishness, and so on. When he has grown, he has understood that he must consider other people and sacrifice himself, do something for his family, responsibility. He is more quiet. He was, short-tempered when he was young. Now, when he has grown, he is more quiet. He's also considered for other people, and many things he has learned. He is patient, many things. But it is such a slow learning that self-development, self-exceeding will take for him for centuries and eons. Yoga is a process of shortening this process. It's not like a log of wood thrown into the ocean of time, where ebb and flow simply make man go backward and forward, and some progress is made by centuries. Yoga is like a steam launch, where you make a decision and go to the point which is intended. You see, that is yoga. A conscious effort at self-development, a conscious effort at self-exceeding. Shorten the labor of universal nature and arrive at a self-development and self-exceeding. How does one do the yoga? What is the meaning of the word yoga? Yoga means union. Union requires two things, always. If you take a cart or a horse and a bullock, and you put the two together, then say, now these two are in union. And then you know that has become real unit. Cart was there, the horse was there, or the bullock was there, and when you put the two together, they are in union, yoga. They are yoga, they are joined, they are in yoga. And then it becomes a integrated whole. Cart alone or horse alone would not do what the two together would do. You see? Now, you take two people who are in love with each other. When they unite, it is yoga, union. It is creative. You see? You take ocean and the river. The river goes and meets the ocean. See, yoga. Meeting of the river and the ocean, you see? So that yoga is union. Union of the individual consciousness with the reality which he is. The individual taking his being, ascending to a higher level, which is quite potential and possible to him to attempt, and coming in contact with his highest reality. When he has contacted the highest reality, he tries to bring the power, the light, the consciousness of that reality into his life. That is the attempt in yoga life. How do you attempt the yoga? All yoga is attempted by some instrument or some power of nature with which one starts. What are the chief powers of man's psychology? His intellect, emotional being, willpower, nervous system, physical body. Mainly, I'm not talking of complications and actions and reactions of his psychological parts. Man's constitution psychologically is made up of intellectual being, mind, emotion, feelings, willpower, power that makes him decide and act, nervous system, and physical body. So yoga can start with any instrument of nature. You can start with the body and build up a system. We have built up in India called Hatha Yoga. You see, which you start with the body, but it will not remain confined to the body only. It will affect your nervous system partly. The nervous system will become also more enhanced, more powerful, more capable of, a greater effectivity and rise to a greater sense of power. You can start with the nervous system, the breathing apparatus of pranayama and pratyahara and dhyana, so on, and then control the vital movements. By controlling, overcome and increase the range and capacity and arrive at a higher and higher consciousness. You can take up emotional being and start with the emotions, make a bhakti yoga, a yoga of devotion, and free the emotions from the egoistic attached movement of human life, in which man is generally subject to actions and reaction, hope and despair, likes and dislikes, love and hatred. That is normal movement, subject to duality. In the bhakti yoga, you release it from there. You release it from its limitations, from attachments, and you widen the range and make it wider and wider till this love reaches the divine, the source of everything. And you offer this love not to any human, individual, but you offer it to the divine. And then you can offer it to the divine in all the aspects of human relationship. One can relate himself with it to the divine like a master and the servant, like father and child, like mother and child, like a friend to friend, like two lovers. You see, there are 9 kinds of devotions in Indian Bhakti Yoga. So it is possible to realize the acme of human relationship in the divine by taking the finite, limited, and ignorant and attached movements of human emotions, making them purer and purer, wider and wider, till they become capable of, experience the contact of the infinite, contact with the divine. And then they realize the relation in life. Well, a bhakta constantly lives in the presence of the divine in his heart, and he feels the presence of the divine in all. He is related to the divine all the time. Whatever he is doing, he is trying to serve the divine. He is looking upon the divine as his friend, as his father, as his mother, as his child, or as his lover. And this relation becomes real to him when he reaches the full development of bhakti yoga. You see, the yoga of devotion, in which the emotions are taken up as the starting point, and gradually from the finite they are led to the infinite. You see, making them purer and purer, freeing them from the individual range, making it more and more cosmic and divine. Well, that is the aim of the bhakti yoga, is to realize the presence of the divine in one's heart by an emotional relationship, and to make possible, all kinds of relations with the infinite, with the divine. The yoga of action or karma yoga takes up the willpower, the power of action, power of decision in mind, and utilizes it for growth towards identification with the cosmic will, with the divine will. So there you start with the attitude, whether you want to use action as a part of your yoga or not. People always say that, oh, I'm doing action, action is yoga, so, all action is not yoga. All karma means action is not karma yoga. Men have to act, but they are not doing karma yoga. Karma yoga starts when one decides to use action as a means for reaching the divine. How to make action a means for reaching the infinite, reaching the supreme? It starts with the idea that desire is the dynamic force which inspires man to act generally. Man acts because he is driven by desire. So what he does is first to free himself from desire. So he acts. Then when a man acts, he always expects a result. He thinks that certain result must come. When he begins karma yoga, yoga of action, he releases his subjection to desire. And so, first of all, what he does is to give up his desire for the result of the action. Whatever action one does, is done for the sake of the divine, and he does not expect any result. The result is given over to the divine. You see, act without any motive for result. Not that there is no aim. Aim is there, but in making an attempt to reach the aim, one is not attached to the result that is going to be attained. One is only attached to making the effort and offering the effort to the divine as the highest that he can do. When a karma yogi acts, he gives up his desire for the fruit and goes on acting. That is first step. What is the sign that one has given up his desires? Inaction. The sign is equanimity. The sign is samatha. Whatever the result of action comes, but the consciousness is not disturbed, either elated or depressed. If the success comes, one is not elated and say, oh, what a wonderful thing. When depression or failure comes, he is not depressed. Well, that is a sign that his action was without desire for the fruit. You see, Gita is the greatest scripture for organization of the science of karma yoga, yoga of action. There you will see a careful study of the Gita will show you, particularly his essays on the Gita, will lead out, if one is very careful and a good student, he will be able to make out steps by which he will be able to organize and even have tests for his own progress in the karma yoga. You see, the sign that one has really done action without attachment to the fruit is the complete preservation of equanimity of temperament in the mind, in the heart, in the vital being. Nothing is disturbed, whatever the result. That's a sign that one has tried to act according to the dictate of karma yoga, first step. As a second step in karma yoga, one gives up the sense of being the doer, the egoism of the actor. You see, one is always full of the sense that I am the actor, you see. When one does the karma yoga for the sake of uniting his consciousness with the consciousness of the higher power, what he does is to remove from him the egoism of the doer, the actor. And this he finds it easy to do if he just watches the power that acts in him. When one watches the power that acts in him, one finds that he cannot claim that the power is his own. It's very difficult to believe and to seriously accept the idea that power that acts in oneself is his own. If you watch the power that one has, one finds that power is given to him almost. He has got it from his parents, from his teachers, from his friends, from books, from society, from religion, from tradition. All that has gone to give him what he is, what he has. It is not as it were, it is something that he absolutely got and from nothing else. No, it is a power that is in him, but it is not unrelated to not only the past, but to the whole of humanity practically. It is some power that is at work which seems to work in him. The more he watches the action of power, the more he becomes conscious that the sense of I being the doer is not completely true. Nature acts in him. A universal power acts in him. Intellectual conviction, if you call, but that is universal power of mind. If you say any a decision of the willpower, but it is given to him. It is not as it were he individually is fully responsible for what he does. It is a universal power that is delegated into him and which is acting. More and more he becomes identified with this universal power, more he finds that it is able to work more effectively, that it's able to take away egoism from all his motives, and then his actions become a kind of sacrifice to a universal will that is at work in the universe. There is a will that is working in the universe. And when the karma yogi has come reach a stage, he finds that his action, his will, is only one offering in that cosmic sacrifice which is going on. A great sacrifice is at work. A cosmic will is operating. A universal power is acting. And it is one item of that universal power which the individual represents. And whatever his will, whatever his power, is offered as an offering in the cosmic sacrifice. So that one wants to know what is the intention of this energy at work. All his individual intentions will be given up, and he will want to identify, harmonize his will with the will that is at work in the universe, work in the cosmos. Then when this identification or harmony is established, well, he will be no longer acting as an individual in the egoistic sense of the term, but a power will be acting in him, using him only as an instrument. Well, that would be the Karma Yogic process. In the Jnana Yoga, you take up the mind, the intellect, and the intellect wants to know things, wants to know the truth, wants to, you see, emotion feels, widening of feeling and making them infinite. Mind wants to know, vital wants to act. You see, life force, action, attachment, victory. Emotional being, feeling, expansion of emotional life, freeing it from its bondages till it reaches the infinite and the absolute. Well, mind seeking for the truth and wanting to know. You see the fulfillment of the impulse to know. Well, there the mind comes to realize and want to find out uh, the truth. And the present mind of mankind today in the modern culture says that there is no beyond truth beyond. But the mind that is subtle and seeking the truth, well, has an intuition that there is a truth. Even a scientist, when he begins his experiment, how does he know that he has something to find out? It's an intuition, isn't it? You take water and say, I must know the constitution of water. But how do you know that there is a constitution of water to be found out? It's an intuition. The first act of knowledge is intuitive. A feeling, I must know. But why you must know? Because there is something to know. You wouldn't know, try to know if there was nothing to know. The fact that mind says, I want to know, well, the object of knowledge exists somewhere. He has to make now a road, a way to reach it. Well, a mind that is subtle and plastic always accepts all possibilities. That is a sign of a true mind. A true mind means mind that is fulfilling its highest function. When mind is limited to what you call pragmatic mind, then it refuses to go further beyond the range of senses and practical reason. But idealistic and true function of the mind is to seek for the reality and know the truth. That's all. It wants to know the truth, not to utilize the truth. It is not interested in what will be the result, how much I will gain if I know the truth. Truth is known for its own sake. That's the function of pure mind. To know, to comprehend, to understand, and if possible, to identify with the reality with the mind. That is the impulse of pure mind. Well, that makes a Jnana Yogi. You see, he wants to know, and then in that case, he first discriminates. Discrimination is his first power. Power to discriminate between right and wrong, true and false, high and low, good and bad. He goes on. Whatever comes, he says, yes, is it good? Is it true? Is it correct? Like that. Anything that presents itself, the mind comes and says, Vivek, they will say in Indian language, discrimination. Then Vairag, that is to say, detachment from that which is not right, which is false, half true, not, you see, bad. Then all that is detaching himself from all that has to be rejected. Then he comes to see that it is not the first mind that is making the effort. It is many people before have tried and have found some truth. And those truths have been expressed in great, aphorisms. The seeking man, after discrimination and detachment from objects that are to be rejected, attaches himself to thinking, meditation with the mind, concentration. And he, for his subject of concentration, he takes anything. He says life. Then he puts his mind on life and goes on allowing mind to concentrate only on one object, one particular object, and allows the mind to go on acquiring the knowledge of it by only an inner concentration. Then that on which the mind is concentrated begins to reveal its truth to such a mind which is concentrated and pure. To other mind, also something can be revealed, but that will be one side of it. You see, a scientist also approaches, matter or life, and something is revealed because he is concentrated. He is also concentrating in his laboratory. It is not given to him for nothing. Scientists think that it is his labor that is giving him the reward, which also is partly true only. It's not the whole truth. You see, the point of concentration of the scientist is reached, and at a certain point, the resistance melts and the truth comes through. Really speaking, it is not he is doing something, but he is rising to a pitch of consciousness or concentration where the resistance of the, the thing to be found melts, and immediately that which is beyond comes through to human range, and man says, "Oh, I have discovered this thing." It is very surprising, you will see. I have been a student of science, therefore I know what it is. You see, that a scientist or a mathematician, when he is faced with a problem, he goes on, and even when he's asleep or doing anything, all the time his mind is given to that. That is like you know, a sheet of iron, and you want to know what it is. You want to find the melting point. It is resisting all the time. I want to know, I want to know. Well, it becomes like a acetylene hydrogen flame, or oxyhydrogen flame. And when it is rising to a point, well, the thing melts. And then, of course, the solution of the problem is given to him. Naturally, he knows. It is by that tremendous concentration that nature reveals point by point her secrets. It is really speaking something that waits to be revealed. It is there waiting till a point of concentration reached, and the knowledge comes through from what man calls inconscience or ignorance to knowledge. This side, that's all that happens. Nothing else is happening. Well, the Jnana Yogi knows this thing, and therefore he simply concentrates and acquires knowledge by concentration of mind on this subject. And in the past, people have acquired this knowledge, so he takes up one text: I am he, Sohamasmi, or Tattvamasi, you see, thou art that, or I and my father are one, or do unto others as you would be done by, or you see, when you are slept on the right side, turn to your left cheek also to the same man. You concentrate on it and say, what does it mean? What does it stand for? All is one, the infinite is all, Sarvam Khalu Idam Brahman. Or this is for habitation by the Lord. All this is for habitation by the Lord. Lord can live in all this. Then you say, what does it mean? Then the mind concentrates upon it. Then the full significance of it, the comprehension of it comes to the mind. That is how the Jnana Yogi proceeds, you see. And these truths are used only as starting point. They are not really, they are starting points for the revelation, or for the opening out of the veil, you see, lifting of the veil. And then the knowledge becomes more real in the sense of identity. You see, knowledge is, as I was telling you at the beginning, but two processes: by mind and sense, and by a process of inner development. And this inner development leads ultimately to identity. Identity through emotion, identity through will, identity through knowledge. Oneness, and one knows the object most by oneness. Identity is the highest way of acquiring knowledge. But in identity, you require to free yourself from all the limitation of personality, from limitation of sense, from egoism, from selfishness, from attachment, from greed, from desire, ambition. Till that is done, the identification cannot be complete. Even in the human knowledge, true knowledge is always by identity, even in ordinary life. When a man knows a thing, he knows it by becoming one with it. He doesn't know it by reading, by thinking, or by sense. Sense is an attempt at identity, really speaking. Sense is, you want to become one with the object of sense, that's all. That is what Stephen Spender wrote a poem, in which he said, the meaning of my seeing the rose is I want to become the rose. That is the meaning of my seeing the rose. When I see the rose, it means I want to become the rose. That is really the thing behind driving, you see. Well, that is incomplete, but all true knowledge is by identity, even in ignorance. This identity is on a plane where one is freed from the lower, mixture of the ignorance of nature, and therefore the identity is more real, more complete, more intense, more effective. The Jnana Yogi makes his mind completely quiet, concentrated on universals, not on the individuals, and therefore the higher truth reflects itself in the mind. And if the Jnana Yogi is capable, well, he rises to the higher plane, or allows the higher plane to reflect itself in the quiet, placid infinity of mind. Then the infinity is reflected in the mind, and he knows something of the nature of that which is beyond mind. Well, that is how a Jnana Yogi proceeds. There is another process of Jnana Yoga also known, which is separation of the watching consciousness from the dynamic movement of nature. Purusha and Prakriti. Prakriti is nature, Purusha is the part of nature that can watch with detachment. You see, one can practice Jnana Yoga on a different basis altogether. It is by separating himself from nature. One starts with the idea, well, am I the body? Then he goes on, see. Oh, yes. When the body is ill, I can say the body is ill. So the one who says the body is ill is not the body. Is it? Yes, that's it. You see, this is a very fine story in the Upanishad. Bhrigu went to his father, you see, Brahma, and said, I want the knowledge of the infinite truth. He said, yes. The gods went and the demons went, the titan. You see, the titan and the god two together went to the supreme and said, I want knowledge, to the rishi, to the seer. So he said, yes, you want to get knowledge, I'll give you knowledge. What is the knowledge you want? We want to know the self. Self, all right. He brought a vessel like this and filled it with water. In those days, there were no mirrors. So he brought the water and said, look inside. You see, in a big vessel of water, like that, filled it with water and said, you want to know the self, is it not? All right. He filled it with water and said, look inside. What do you see? See yourself. That is the self. So they went, both of them went. The Titan was happy that he has seen himself. The God, the man who was seeking the divine went halfway and said, yes, that is all right, but supposing, you see, self they say is perfect, it is eternal, infinite and divine, but this self was not perfect. Supposing I had lost one eye, I would not seen myself as perfect. So he went back to him and said that, no, you gave me the knowledge of the self, but what is the meaning of it? Self is always supposed to be perfect. We heard that when you say self, self means something that is infinite, divine, perfect. But this self is not perfect that I saw here. I can have one eye, I can have one hand cut off or one leg, and then I'll be lame or I'll be blind or I'll be one-eyed. What is this? So he said, yes. You see, when you lie down and sleep, then you have dream. Yes, he said, that is true. That even if I am lame, in the dream I can run. Yes, even if I am, you see, disabled in body, in dream I can be perfect. So he said, that is yourself. So I said, you see now self. He said, all right. He went home. And then he went. Halfway he said, yes, he told me right. That when I am asleep, the self, bodily self may be imperfect, old or decrepit or, wounded. But the dream self is perfect. It is all right. It is happy and it can go. It can be very. Then after some time he said, but in the dream sometimes I weep. Sometimes I'm unhappy in dream. And they said that nature of self is that it is never unhappy. It is always delight. He came back and said, you told me that what is this? The self is perfect and the self that is in dream is perfect. But in dream I suffer, sometimes suffer. I weep, I'm happy. Sometimes I'm unhappy. But they say that so self is always in delight. It is infinite and perfect. So he said, yeah, that is true. You see, then he gave further instruction to make him feel that the identity was with the cosmic spirit. Well, I was telling you about separation of the self, that there is a process of knowledge in which one says, am I the body? No, I am not the body. Then am I only desires? Then he said, no, I am not desires. I am not a bundle of desires. Because I can see my own desires as if they were outside and not within me, so to say. I can be moved by desires, but I can detach myself and look at my desires as if they belong to somebody else. So I am independent. Then he said, am I the mind? So is man body? Is man only desires and impulses? Is he only ideas, thoughts, suggestions that come to him, even ideas of philosophy? The Jnana Yogi who practice the separation of Purusha and Prakriti, nature and the self, stands on a ground of detachment and watches the flow of nature quite outside himself. He feels that nature is flowing and he has nothing to do with his nature. He is only witness, he is only seer, he is only detached onlooker. He is looking at his own nature and passing judgment as he was passing judgment on somebody else. What a fool he is, or what a rogue he is, or what an idiot he is. And he completely knows that that is not himself. From this witness self, he can acquire the control of nature gradually. He can refuse certain movements in his nature and say, these movements I do not want. He can allow certain movements, he can disallow certain movements. Then he is gradually establishes mastery. Thus, slowly he goes step by step from the witness to the consenter, from consenter to the supporter, from supporter to the enjoyer, from enjoyer to the, well, to the Lord, so to say. He becomes the master of himself. That is another process of Jnana Yoga. Well, these are some of the psychological processes which can be practiced. Now, Sri Aurobindo brought a greater truth than these in the sense that the Jnana Yogi was generally isolated from life, because in order to concentrate like that, he has to separate himself from life. And more often than not, he used to develop only his intelligence or mind, but not necessarily his emotional being or his willpower. The bhakta took up his emotion, and in order to carry out his bhakti yoga, he would have to isolate himself from activities of life, because life would not allow him to fully carry out the items of bhakti yoga in life. So he has to create a special mode of life. And secondly, they would generally, the bhakti yogis, the devotees, omit or neglect intellect or mind. The seeking for the intellect, they would say, well, what is that? Dry, mind is dry. You see, the Jnana Yoga would say emotion is ignorance. What is the meaning of man feeling emotion? You see, there was an exclusive path leading only to fulfillment of one instrument of nature. You see, Sri Aurobindo for the first time came and said that this is not correct. The total instrumentation of man has a right to fulfillment. His physical body, his nervous system, his vital being, his willpower, his emotional being, his intellectual being, all must be fulfilled in the divine. There should be no exclusion, one. And there should be no compulsion or to create a special mode of life. You should be able to pursue the goal of spiritual reality in any mode of life. It's not necessary to have a special mode. That is where he brought in a new element in the practice of yoga by making it almost available to anybody in humanity. He freed it from tradition, first of all. There are no traditional forms of yoga. All these forms, I have given you only the principles, but there are forms attached to each. In the Bhakti Yoga, you will have to do a certain sign and then worship an image and lighting the lamp and then going waving the light. All that I have eliminated because it is secondary to from my point of view. I only brought in the principle. But each one has a process and a tradition and, a lot of detail. Well, all that he put aside because he thought that if that was the goal for the whole of humanity, all this is secondary. This is not important. Important is the movement of man's consciousness. Therefore, he put away tradition aside, forms of tradition aside, and generalized the essential, quintessence of all the effort of past yogas into psychological processes, making it almost international in the sense that anybody who wants to do and said, I have a spiritual urge, I want to make my religious experience concrete. All right, does he want? That is, he has to decide, as I told you last time. It is, Sri Aurobindo doesn't say that you must practice yoga. No. If you want to practice, there is no bar. There is no necessity to accept a book, accept an outer process or a traditional mold. It is necessary to ask, do you want? Well, then there is a psychological process which is quite rational, quite understandable. Step by step you go. This organization of synthesis of all the parts and an integral approach, fulfillment of every natural instrument of man, his intellect, his emotional being, his vital being, his physical being included, well, that makes a special, contribution of Sri Aurobindo to modern humanity, because that would be then making possible spirituality as a dynamic element in man's life. You need not abandon life. You can take up life and raise it, so to say. Use it first to reach the spiritual truth. Use it as a path, so to say. And when one has reached, to bring down the light of the spirit in life. Well, that would be something so different from the past that you can say it's a departure. What does his yoga then consist in? He said this is all right so far as that goes. You have to decide whether you want to do the yoga or not. So yoga is voluntary. One. Secondly, the process of concentration can be brought into effectivity by concentrating on aspiration for the truth. So he says aspiration is one element in his yoga. Aspire. Then you can aspire in the mind, aspire in the emotional being, aspire in the vital being, aspire in the will. Aspire for the truth, for the light, for the supreme. So during life, whatever you might be doing, the mind, the intellect, if it is wanting the spiritual life and has got a urge, it must aspire for the truth. So constant aspiration for the truth, for the light, for the supreme. Aspiration not in one part, but in all the parts of human psychology, in all the instrument of man's being. Aspiration in the intellect, aspiration in the emotion, aspiration in the will, aspiration in the physical being. If you can make physical being conscious, to aspire for the light in the cells of the body, so to say. That's it. So aspiration, intense, constant, sincere. That is the first necessity in his yoga. You need not give up anything, but you decide whether you want to do it. Well, then you aspire. You are conscious in your emotional being, immediately you turn your aspiration to fulfillment in the divine and put the aspiration into form, whatever form it comes. You sit down in meditation for some time to accustom yourself to meditation. Well, what do you meditate upon? You aspire. Aspiration is like a fire. In the ancient Vedic language, they will say, you must have fire before you can do sacrifice. Without fire, there can be no sacrifice. There can be no growth without the flame of aspiration. Aspiration is the flame of fire. Fire in the human heart for the truth, for the light, for the supreme. That fire must be constantly kept burning. And in that fire, to keep it burning, one has to put his desires, his impulses, his egoism, his greed, his likes and dislikes and hatred and attachments and everything. You must throw aside. When the aspiration is rising, all the elements of ignorant nature that arise have to be rejected. So an element of aspiration in all the parts, then rejection of that which stands in the way of fulfilling the aspiration. That is the second element in his yoga. Rejection. Rejection of that which stands in the way of fulfillment of the aspiration. Aspiration for the truth, well, if anything contradicts it in nature, one must be able to reject. That the individual yogi or sadhak has to do. Third is surrender to a truth which is self-existent within and without, all over. You can feel it either within you, around you, or above you. As you feel, you surrender to the truth and seek its help. Because man's ordinary idea is that he will do the whole job. Man feels that I must do everything. This is a partial truth. Man's effort has a place, as I told you. Aspiration, rejection, and surrender are to be done by man. The rest of development of self-exceeding has to be done by the divine's help. One cannot exceed his present formula by his unaided effort. This is a great element of Sri Aurobindo's yoga which people hardly understand. Just as you can't sit on your own shoulder. One can't sit on his own shoulder. Yes, somebody, yes, can do it for you. That is to say, do something to. Well, if one has to exceed the present formula of man, the divine help is necessary. And divine is, from normal point of view, divine is somewhat abstract, some absentee landlord. God is like an absentee landlord who is not managing his estate but is retired. This is the normal idea. Oh, poor God doesn't know anything. We have to bring everything to his notice. Then only he will know. These are very imperfect and childish ideas about God. You see, they were so extra cosmic and so distant. How can anything reach him? What we do is what we do. He doesn't know what we do. Most, very full of half-truth and wrong and falsehood about God. Divine, if he has any meaning at all, there is no point of space on which he is absent. And there is no moment of time in which he cannot act. That is the one definition of God which people have to understand. Divine is the most dynamic reality you can imagine. This dynamics that you see is nothing. It is not even a blade of grass. Not even a blade of grass. All cosmic power that you can conceive on the plane of matter or life or mind is nothing. That is God. A power that is dynamic. No moment of time in which it cannot intervene. People think, how can God have to do with my family affair? You don't want to give it. Say that. Be honest. I don't want you to interfere. There was a soldier in the last war, you see, and an Indian soldier told somebody, a European soldier, said, why don't you pray? He said that, you see, he creates troubles. Say, why? We put him in the church and say, don't come out. You see, we come here and give you respects. But as for this, well, leave it to us because too much interference. Then some fellow says, I know God, and then do this. Third fellow comes and says, I know God, do this, and creates terrible confusion. So we say, no, remain there. We come and pay you respect and don't interfere in life. That is what man does. That's right. That is what man wants. He doesn't want. But if he wants, there is no circumstance in which you cannot get it. There is nothing small and great in divine life. In spiritual life, there is nothing, oh, this is great and this nothing. In his creation, everything has, possibility of his contact. One can contact. His touch can be anywhere. It is not that, oh, God must be dealing only in great things. In great things, the human ignorance prevents him from doing anything. Because somebody says, I will protect humanity. He doesn't want to bring in God at all. God, even if he wants to do, has to work through ignorance, tremendous resistance. Whereas in humble life, when one wants, it is easy for him to intervene. Absolutely easy. Because when he's sincere, open, there is no resistance. Here, there is organizations and fellows who are egoistic and full of themselves and thinking of no end of their capacity, you see, which comes to nothing. They can't do anything they want to do, but all the time they are thinking, unless they do, nothing will happen. You see, there is no condition in which this divine force cannot act. That is why life can become a mode of progress towards spiritual life, because God is everywhere and is the most dynamic reality. The last item of self-surrender brings in this power of God to act on man. And it is the most powerful influence that one can bring into his life. It is that which changes life. But really the transformation of life is brought about by making oneself ready. Aspiration, rejection and surrender makes one only ready. The real change is brought about by the divine agency, the divine power, working on the human material that is offered. People think, oh, if I surrender, I will lose my personality. What will happen to me? This is the greatest ignorance that can go about. The fulfillment lies in that which is perfect. It is allowing something more perfect to work on an imperfect material. It is not a loss, but the greatest gain. If you have $100 and you say, but supposing I give my $100 to the unlimited concern in which there are multi-million dollars, I will lose my $100. You forget it. You become a partner in a firm in which there is no limited capital. Self-surrender is not a loss, but a tremendous gain. You cannot gain more than by surrender. Because it is the opening out to yourself to something which is absolutely unlimited in power, in consciousness, in its effectivity. That is the power of surrender. And it is that which ultimately fulfills the aspiration by transforming the human being into the mold of its own intention. It is the fulfillment of divine will in life, which is really the fulfillment of man. Man is here not to fulfill his ego, but to fulfill a will that is at work. And to allow this will to work, surrender and aspiration are the two great powers, with rejection given as a condition for making oneself ready for the transformation. When one is ready, then the transformation is done by the help of the higher power. Then one is fulfilled in the divine will. After one fulfills the divine will, there is no greater fulfillment of man than to fulfill the will of the divine in his life, individually and collectively. You can create a collective mold of life, a group of life, people who come together to reach spiritual truths by life, and then bring in the light of the divine into the life. It is quite possible to create a collective mold also. Well, that is where Sri Aurobindo's yoga stands, with the three great movements of aspiration, rejection, and surrender. The man is made, capable of approaching the truth. And when he has approached the truth and realized it, well, the road is open for the light to come down. This I very often call the sunlit path. It is a sunlit path, so clear and so easy that many people think it is not a path. When you tell people that, how can there be, what is there? There's no process. We must have a footpath to go by, you see, and so on. This is like 100 miles road on which you can go slow if you like. You can run if you like. You can take a car. You can take off with a plane. It depends on how intense, how sincere, and how earnest you are. It's a raw road, you see, it's a sunlit road. There is 100 miles, and it is so wide that people don't feel it a road. I know. I have talked to many people and say, but how can that be? It is. I said, look, if you want to walk slow, walk slow. There's no hurry. If you have a cycle, go by cycle. If you have a car, you can take and go quick. It depends. Are you intense? Well, you will make a quick movement. It is there for you to take advantage of. Well, that is what Sri Aurobindo has brought to humanity, and I think that is what promises man's rational seeking for a fulfillment of his religious and spiritual life. And if man says this is rational, Sri Aurobindo would say not only rational, it is inevitable. It is not only rational, inevitable. In the scheme of things, one day it has to work out. Well, by allowing it to work in oneself, will be only allowing a universal truth to realize itself in us. Whether we like it or not, it is going to one day work itself out. The best that one can do is to put himself on the side so as to side with that which is already coming. Because it is one day going to happen, there is no question, because some fulfillment of man must be there. And it can be only along this line of realizing that which he has dreamt for ages together. Well, I think that gives you a rough outline of the yogic process, which is regarded as mystic and marvelous and abnormal. There's nothing more normal than yoga from Mother and Sri Aurobindo's point of view. Yoga is, she says, and they say, is the most normal thing if a man wants spiritual truth. If he doesn't want, then of course naturally there is no compulsion. He can follow ordinary life, which is open to everyone, which one does follow. Yoga is when you decide to reach a spiritual truth or reality. Well, then it is quite a normal process of growth and self-exceeding. And when one exceeds himself, he fulfills the divine will. And to fulfill the divine will is the highest privilege of man.